The strange inheritance. The sound of celebration echoed across the massive hall. Humans, victorious in a fierce interstellar war, were dividing the spoils. Commander Jacob Reynolds stood among the crowd, uneasy despite the cheers around him. The division of spoils ceremony was supposed to reward heroes like him. But Jacob wasn't here for treasure or glory. He just wanted to finish his duties and return to Earth. Rows of captured alien technology were displayed on raised platforms, advanced weapons, shimmering crystals, and strange machines. These items would strengthen humanity's hold over the galaxy. Soldiers were stepping forward one by one, claiming their rewards. When Jacob's name was called, the room grew silent. He was one of the war's greatest heroes, after all. Jacob stepped forward, his boots echoing against the polished floor. A senior officer greeted him with a grin. "Commander Reynolds, your contribution to the victory is unmatched. We have something special for you." Jacob tilted his head, curious. The officer gestured, and two guards stepped forward. Between them was a figure wrapped in a delicate silver cloak. As they moved closer, Jacob realized it wasn't a thing, but a person. The figure raised its head, and Jacob froze. She was an alien, but unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered like starlight, and her large, glowing eyes seemed to pierce right through him. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, and she moved with a grace that didn't seem entirely natural. "This is your reward," the officer announced. "One of the last survivors of the enemy's royal line. She is a rare prize, Commander." Jacob's throat went dry. "A person? You're giving me a person?" His voice betrayed his shock. The officer shrugged. "She's not human. She's property, and a valuable one at that." The alien girl stood silently, her glowing eyes fixed on Jacob. There was no fear in her expression, only a quiet strength that unnerved him. The room waited for his response. Jacob clenched his fists. This didn't sit right with him. He had fought in this war to protect humanity, not to take prisoners as trophies. But refusing a gift in front of everyone would cause trouble, and he couldn't afford that. "Not yet." "I accept," Jacob said through gritted teeth. The room erupted in applause, but Jacob barely noticed. His mind was racing. What was he supposed to do with her? The girl was handed over to him, and Jacob led her out of the hall. The cheers faded as the doors closed behind them. Leaving the two alone in a quiet corridor, Jacob stopped and turned to her. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl stared at him for a moment, then looked away. She didn't respond. "Can you understand me?" Jacob tried again. Still no answer. She remained silent, her glowing eyes studying him carefully. Frustrated, Jacob sighed. "All right, fine. We'll figure this out later." He led her to his quarters on the starship. It was a simple room, not meant for entertaining guests. The girl stood in the middle of the room, her movements fluid but hesitant. Jacob couldn't help but notice how she seemed to take in every detail: the lights, the walls, even the hum of the ship's engines. "I don't know why they gave you to me," Jacob said, sitting down on a chair. "I didn't ask for this. I don't even want it. But here we are." The girl didn't respond. Instead, she walked over to a nearby console. Jacob tensed, ready to stop her, but she simply placed her hand on it. The lights in the room flickered for a moment, and the console made a strange noise. "What the?" Jacob started, but the girl turned to him, her expression calm. "Energy," she said softly. Her voice was melodic, almost hypnotic. Jacob blinked. "You can speak." The girl didn't respond. Instead, she returned to the center of the room and stood silently once more. Jacob stared at her, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Who was she? What did she want? And why did the lights flicker when she touched the console? Before he could ask, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Commander Reynolds, report to the bridge immediately," the voice said. Jacob groaned. "Great. Stay here," he said to the girl. He wasn't sure if she would listen, but he didn't have time to argue. As he left the room, his mind was a storm of questions. The girl wasn't just a prisoner. There was something strange about her, something powerful. And Jacob had a feeling he was about to find out exactly what. But deep down, he wondered, was this reward a gift or a curse? The silent mystery. Jacob returned to his quarters after a long meeting with the senior officers. The discussion on war reparations and rebuilding colonies had left him exhausted, but his mind kept drifting back to the alien girl, Lyra, as he decided to call her in his thoughts, though she had never told him her name. When he entered, she was exactly where he had left her, standing silently in the middle of the room like a statue. Her glowing eyes tracked him as he stepped inside, but she said nothing. The quiet was unsettling. "You could at least sit," Jacob muttered, dropping into his chair. "You're making me nervous." Lyra tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Then, to his surprise, she moved and sat cross-legged on the floor, her movements so smooth they seemed almost choreographed. Jacob blinked at her, unsure of what to make of her obedience or her eerie grace. "All right," he said, leaning forward. "Since we're stuck together, let's figure out some ground rules. First, you stay in this room unless I tell you otherwise. Got it?" She didn't respond, but he thought he saw a faint nod. "Second," Jacob continued, "no touching anything without asking me. That little trick you pulled with the console earlier. What was that anyway? Some kind of tech interface?" Lyra didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed at the console. The lights in the room dimmed again, and the console emitted a soft hum. Jacob's eyes widened as the holographic interface lit up on its own, displaying streams of data he couldn't understand. "Hey, stop that," he snapped, standing abruptly. Lyra dropped her hand, and the lights returned to normal. She stared at him, her expression calm, but her glowing eyes seemed almost amused. Jacob rubbed his temples. "This is going to drive me crazy. Look, I don't know what they did to you, but you're not a lab experiment anymore. You don't have to show off." Lyra tilted her head again, as if trying to process his words. Then she did something unexpected. She reached for the small communicator clipped to her wrist, a standard device all captives were issued for monitoring. She pressed a button, and the tiny screen projected a series of glowing symbols into the air. Jacob stared at the symbols, his frustration giving way to curiosity. "What is that? Your language?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Great. I don't speak alien," Jacob muttered, but then an idea struck him. "Wait a minute." He walked over to his desk and rummaged through the drawers until he found a handheld translator device. It was outdated but functional, a relic from earlier conflicts with alien species. He activated it and held it up to Lyra. "Try speaking into this," he said. Lyra hesitated, then leaned closer to the device. Her lips moved, and her voice, soft and melodic, filled the room. The translator struggled for a moment, emitting static, before it produced a crude but understandable message. "Energy flows. Machines. Respond." Jacob frowned. "What does that mean? Are you controlling the ship's systems?" Lyra paused, then spoke again. This time, the translator worked faster, not control. "Harmony. I feel their voices." Jacob stared at her, his mind racing. Harmony. Voices? What was she talking about? Was she saying she could communicate with the ship's systems? The implications were staggering. Before he could press her further, the ship suddenly jolted. An alarm blared, and Jacob's communicator crackled to life. "Commander Reynolds, report to the bridge immediately," a panicked voice shouted. "We've got incoming hostiles, unknown origin." Jacob's heart sank. He grabbed his sidearm and turned to Lyra. "Stay here. Do not leave this room." Lyra's glowing eyes followed him, but she didn't move or respond. Jacob hesitated for a moment, then bolted out the door. On the bridge, chaos reigned. Officers were shouting orders, and the main screen displayed a fleet of unidentified ships closing in fast. Their sleek designs and glowing blue engines didn't match any known enemy. "Who are they?" Jacob demanded as he entered. "No idea, sir," an officer replied. "They're not broadcasting any ID codes, and they're targeting us specifically." Jacob's stomach churned. His gaze flicked to the tactical display, which showed the enemy ships forming a tight formation around the human fleet. "Raise shields," he ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, and someone figure out why they're coming after us." As the crew scrambled to follow his commands, Jacob's mind raced. This couldn't be a coincidence. The timing was too perfect. Could these ships be connected to Lyra? Were they here to reclaim her? The first volley of enemy fire struck the ship, rocking it violently. Sparks flew from the consoles, and alarms blared louder. "Shields at 60%. Someone shouted. Jacob gritted his teeth. "Return fire. Let's show them we're not an easy target." The human ships responded, firing bright streams of energy at the enemy vessels. The battle was fierce, but the enemy's precision and speed gave them an edge. Jacob knew they couldn't hold out for long. Back in his quarters, Lyra sat quietly as the ship shook around her. Her glowing eyes flickered, and she placed her hand on the floor. A faint hum resonated through the room. "Danger," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling for the first time. She closed her eyes, and the lights in the room dimmed once more. Whatever was coming, Lyra knew the battle wasn't just about humans and their enemies. It was about her. And she wasn't sure if Jacob was ready for the truth. Unraveling the truth. The battle raged on outside the starship, but Jacob couldn't shake the nagging thought that this attack wasn't random. Something about the enemy ships felt deliberate. Their precision, their formation. It was as if they knew exactly where to strike. And deep down, Jacob had a sinking feeling that their target wasn't just the ship. It was Lyra. He returned to his quarters after the skirmish had forced the enemy into a temporary retreat. His steps were hurried, his mind a storm of questions. When he entered the room, he found Lyra sitting exactly where he had left her, her hands resting gently on her knees. Her glowing eyes lifted to meet his, calm yet unreadable. "We need to talk," Jacob said firmly. He dropped into the chair across from her, leaning forward. "Who are they?" "The ships attacking us. Are they here for you?" Lyra hesitated. Her shimmering skin seemed to pulse faintly, as if reacting to her emotions. Finally, she spoke, her melodic voice flowing through the translator device. "Yes, they are. My people. Or what remains of them." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "Your people? Why are they attacking us?" Lyra's gaze fell to the floor. "They do not trust you. They think I am a prisoner, a trophy of war. They will destroy your fleet to retrieve me." Jacob's jaw tightened. "They're willing to risk an all-out war for you. Why? What makes you so important?" Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time, she looked almost sad. "I am not like the others. My blood carries the key to our technology. I can connect to our machines, hear their voices, guide their power. Without me, my people's ships are silent." Jacob leaned back in his chair, the weight of her words sinking in. "You're saying you're some kind of living interface, a bridge between your people and their technology?" Lyra nodded. "It is why your leaders took me. They hope to use my abilities to unlock the secrets of our ships, our weapons." Jacob's fists clenched. He had suspected there was more to her reward, but this revelation hit harder than he expected. Lyra wasn't just valuable. She was critical to an entire civilization's survival. And now, because of humanity's greed, her people were ready to wipe them out to get her back. He rubbed his temples, trying to process it all. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" Lyra's voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Would you have believed me? You see me as an enemy, a threat. Even now, you are uncertain." Jacob couldn't argue with that. She wasn't wrong. He had spent the past day unsure whether she was a prisoner, a weapon, or something else entirely. But now he had no choice but to trust her, because if her people launched another attack, they wouldn't survive. As the ship's alarms blared again, signaling the enemy's return, Jacob made a decision. He stood abruptly, his mind racing. "We need to get you off this ship. If they're after you, then staying here puts everyone at risk." Lyra looked up at him, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "And if I leave, they will pursue me. You will still be in danger." Jacob frowned. "Then we need a way to stop them. Can you?" "I don't know. Talk to them. Tell them you're safe." Lyra hesitated, then shook her head. "They will not listen to words. They believe humans are ruthless. They will only stop if I show them." "Show them what?" "That I am free. That you are not my captor." Jacob paced the room, his mind racing. "How do we do that? They're not exactly going to roll out a welcome mat for us." Lyra stood, her movements deliberate and graceful. "There is a way, but it is dangerous." Jacob stopped and turned to her, his brow furrowed. "Define dangerous." She stepped closer, her shimmering skin casting faint light on the walls. "Your ship has a communications relay. If I connect to it, I can send a signal directly to their fleet. They will know it is me." Jacob crossed his arms. "And the danger? They may see it as a trick. They could attack before they hear my message. Or," she hesitated, her glowing eyes flickering, "the connection could harm me. Our technology, and yours, are incompatible. The strain could be fatal." Jacob stared at her, his chest tightening. The logical part of his brain screamed at him to refuse. But the alternative was worse. If they did nothing, her people would destroy the ship, and everyone on it. "Let me get this straight," Jacob said. "You're willing to risk your life to stop this?" Lyra nodded, her expression steady. "If it will save your people and mine, then yes." Jacob ran a hand through his hair, muttering a curse under his breath. This was insane. But looking into her glowing eyes, he saw no fear, only determination. "All right," he said finally. "We'll do it. But if this goes south, I'm getting you out of here. No arguments." Lyra gave a small nod, her shimmering skin glowing faintly brighter. "Thank you, Jacob." The sound of his name from her lips startled him, but he pushed it aside. Time was running out, and they had a plan to set in motion. As the ship shook from another blast, Jacob led Lyra out of the room, his resolve hardening. They were walking into the unknown, but for the first time, Jacob felt a strange sense of trust. Lyra wasn't just a reward or a mystery anymore. She was an ally. And together, they might just survive. The hidden agenda. The ship groaned under the stress of incoming fire as Jacob and Lyra hurried toward the central communications hub. The corridors were dimly lit, the emergency lighting casting flickering shadows that made the journey feel even more ominous. Jacob kept his sidearm ready, though he doubted it would be much help if Lyra's plan didn't work. As they moved, crew members gave them wary glances. Whispers followed in their wake, soldiers and technicians speculating about the alien girl walking beside their commander. Some looked at Lyra with curiosity, others with suspicion. Jacob ignored them all. He had bigger concerns. "Stay close," he said over his shoulder. "The comms hub is just ahead." Lyra nodded silently, her glowing eyes scanning their surroundings. Despite the chaos, she moved with a calmness that unnerved Jacob. It was as if she understood something he didn't. Something far bigger than the battle raging outside. They arrived at the comms hub, a circular room filled with monitors, consoles, and a towering relay dish that dominated the center. Technicians were scrambling to maintain the system, their frantic movements reflecting the urgency of the situation. "Clear the room," Jacob barked. "Now." The technicians hesitated, but the authority in his voice left no room for argument. They filed out quickly, casting nervous glances at Lyra as they passed. When the last one was gone, Jacob secured the doors and turned to her. "This is it," he said, gesturing to the relay dish. You're sure you can make this work? Lyra stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the relay. I will try. Jacob didn't like the uncertainty in her tone, but there was no turning back now. He watched as she approached the relay and placed her hands on its base. Her glowing skin pulsed faintly, and the room filled with a soft hum that seemed to vibrate in Jacob's chest. What are you doing? He asked, unable to hide his unease. Listening, Lyra replied, her voice distant. The machines here are resistant. They do not trust me. Jacob raised an eyebrow. Machines don't trust anyone. Lyra didn't respond. Her glowing eyes closed, and the hum grew louder. The relay began to emit faint sparks, and the monitors flickered to life, displaying streams of alien symbols. Jacob's heart raced. Is that normal? He asked, taking a step closer. No, Lyra said softly. Your technology is fighting me. It does not want to connect. Jacob cursed under his breath. Can you override it? Lyra's brow furrowed, and her shimmering skin brightened. Yes, but it will hurt. Hurt? What do you mean? Before he could finish, Lyra gasped. Her body tensed, and the light emanating from her grew blinding. Jacob shielded his eyes, panic rising in his chest. Lyra, he shouted, stop, you're going to kill yourself. I must do this, she said through gritted teeth. Her voice was strained, but her resolve was unshaken. They need to hear me. The room trembled as the connection solidified. The alien symbols on the monitors shifted into recognizable star charts and fleet movements. The distorted voice crackled through the speakers, speaking in a language Jacob didn't understand. That's them, Lyra said weakly. My people. Jacob grabbed the translator device and held it to the speaker. The alien voice became clearer, though its tone was sharp and commanding. Release her, humans, or we will destroy you all. Jacob's jaw tightened. He leaned toward the console. This is Commander Jacob Reynolds of the human fleet. Lyra is safe. She's trying to communicate with you. Stand down, and we can talk. The response was immediate and hostile. Lies. You have taken our queen. You will pay for your crimes. Jacob's eye. He turned to the tactical display, where the alien ships still loomed. They wouldn't stand by forever, especially if reinforcements arrived. And Lyra, she didn't deserve to be a pawn in humanity's games. Jacob made his decision. Helm, he said, his voice firm. Prepare for a jump to deep space. The crew exchanged startled glances. Sir, the pilot asked hesitantly. You heard me, Jacob said. We're leaving. Plot a course far from both human and alien territories. Commander, if we disobey command. Do it, Jacob barked. His tone left no room for argument. Back in his quarters, Jacob found Lyra sitting cross-legged on the floor, her glowing eyes dimmed with exhaustion. She looked up as he entered, her expression unreadable. We're leaving, he said without preamble. I'm taking you somewhere safe. Lyra tilted her head, her voice soft. You would risk everything for me. Why? Jacob sighed, sitting across from her. Because this isn't right. You're not a trophy. You're not a tool. You're someone who deserves a chance to live. And maybe I'm just tired of following orders that make me feel like a monster. Lyra studied him for a moment, then gave a faint smile. Thank you, Jacob, but they won't let you go so easily. I know, he admitted. That's why we need to be smart about this. Before they could say more, the ship jolted violently, throwing Jacob to the floor. Alarms blared, and the intercom crackled to life. Commander Reynolds to the bridge. We're under attack. Jacob's heart pounded as he helped Lyra to her feet. Stay close, he said, grabbing his sidearm. Together, they rushed to the bridge. The scene on the bridge was chaos. Enemy fire lit up the view screen as the alien fleet bombarded the ship. The truce had broken. Shields at 40%. A crew member shouted, We won't last much longer. Jacob gritted his teeth. What the hell happened? Why are they attacking? Their lead ship transmitted a message just before they opened fire, the communications officer said, her voice shaking. It said, "You have betrayed us." Jacob's stomach sank. The reinforcements. Admiral Hayes must have deployed them early, and the alien fleet had seen it as a trap. Now both sides were ready for war. "Helm, execute the jump now," Jacob barked. "It's too dangerous," the pilot replied. "The jump drive is unstable under this much fire." "Do it anyway," Jacob snapped. "It's our only chance." The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life. The bridge lights flickered, and the stars on the view screen blurred as the ship entered the jump. For a moment, everything was eerily silent. Then the ship emerged in an uncharted region of space. The crew held their breath, waiting for enemy fire, but none came. The alien fleet hadn't followed. Jacob exhaled in relief. "Status: jump successful," the pilot said, though his voice was shaky. "No sign of pursuit." Jacob nodded. "Good. Maintain a low profile and scan the area. I don't want any surprises." He turned to Lyra, who stood quietly at the edge of the bridge. Her glowing eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in them. "We're safe for now," he said, "but this isn't over." "No," Lyra agreed, her voice steady. "It is only the beginning." Jacob knew she was right. They had escaped for now, but both humanity and her people would be hunting them. Together, they had defied orders, broken alliances, and risked everything. And as he looked at Lyra, Jacob realized he would do it all again, because some things were worth fighting for. The final stand. The ship drifted in the cold expanse of uncharted space, its hull battered but holding together. Jacob stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical display. The silence was heavy, but he knew it wouldn't last. Both Lyra's people and humanity would track them eventually. They had bought time, but not much. "Commander," the communications officer called out, "we've picked up faint energy signatures nearby. It's not human or alien tech." Jacob frowned and stepped closer to the console. "Can you identify it?" The officer shook her head. "Negative. The readings are strange. It's like nothing we've encountered before." Jacob's instincts screamed caution, but he also knew they couldn't stay adrift forever. "Helm, take us toward the source. Let's find out what we're dealing with." As the ship moved toward the unknown, Lyra entered the bridge. She looked more rested than before, her glowing eyes calm but watchful. Jacob turned to her, his voice low. "We've picked up something. Could be a threat, but it's not like your people's tech. Any idea what it could be?" Lyra tilted her head, her shimmering skin pulsing faintly. "This region is forgotten. A place neither my people nor yours have explored. What lies here may predate both of us." Jacob's stomach tightened. "Great. Just what we need. Another mystery." The ship arrived at the source of the energy signature, revealing an ancient, massive structure floating in the void. It looked like a city carved from stone, its surfaces etched with glowing symbols that seemed to shift and writhe as the ship approached. The structure radiated power, and the air on the bridge grew thick with tension. "What is that?" Jacob muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra stepped forward, her glowing eyes fixed on the structure. "A sanctuary. My people spoke of places like this in legends. It is said they were created by an ancient race to protect those in need." "Protect how?" Jacob asked, his tone skeptical. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Her expression was distant, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. Finally, she said, "We should go there. It may offer us what we need." Jacob hesitated. The structure didn't look like a place of safety. It looked like a trap. But they had few options, and if Lyra believed it could help them, he had to trust her. A small team, including Jacob and Lyra, boarded a shuttle and headed toward the structure. As they entered its atmosphere, the glowing symbols on the surface pulsed brighter, and the shuttle's systems began to flicker. "Sir, we're losing control." the pilot shouted. "Hold it steady," Jacob barked. He glanced at Lyra, who had closed her eyes, her hands resting on the shuttle's console. The flickering steadied, and the shuttle began to descend smoothly. "What did you do?" Jacob asked, his voice tinged with awe. "The sanctuary recognizes me," Lyra said softly. "It is allowing us to enter." The shuttle landed in a vast courtyard, surrounded by towering spires that seemed to hum with energy. The air was heavy with an ancient power that made Jacob's skin prickle. Lyra stepped out first, her glowing skin resonating faintly with the pulsing light of the structure. As the team followed her, the ground beneath them shifted, and a low, melodic hum filled the air. The spires began to move, rearranging themselves as if responding to Lyra's presence. Jacob raised his weapon instinctively, but Lyra held up a hand. "It is not hostile," she said. "It is awakening." The group moved deeper into the structure, following Lyra's lead. They'd reached a central chamber where a massive crystalline device hovered in the air, surrounded by swirling lights. Lyra approached it, her glowing eyes wide with wonder. "This is it," she whispered. "A beacon. It can end the conflict." Jacob stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "How? What does it do?" "It can broadcast a message to both our people," Lyra explained. "A message they cannot ignore. It will show them the truth, our history, our pain, and our hope for peace." Jacob glanced at the device, then back at Lyra. "And what's the catch?" "There's always a catch." Lyra's expression darkened. "The beacon draws its power from life. If I activate it, it will take part of me, perhaps all of me." Jacob's chest tightened. "No, there has to be another way." Lyra shook her head. "This is the way. If I do not act, the war will continue. More will die, your people and mine." Jacob's mind raced. He wanted to argue, to stop her, but he saw the determination in her eyes. She had made her choice, and he knew he couldn't take it from her. As Lyra placed her hands on the beacon, the chamber lit up with a blinding light. The symbols on the walls pulsed faster, and the hum grew into a powerful resonance that seemed to vibrate through Jacob's very soul. Images began to fill the air, visions of Lyra's people, their history, their suffering, and their desperate hope for survival. Jacob saw humanity's aggression, their fear, and their triumphs. The beacon wasn't just transmitting a message, it was weaving their stories together. Lyra's glowing skin dimmed as the beacon drew energy from her, but she stood firm, her expression calm and resolute. Jacob felt a lump in his throat as he watched her sacrifice herself for the chance at peace. Finally, the beacon's light dimmed, and the chamber fell silent. Lyra collapsed to the ground, and Jacob rushed to her side. "Lyra," he said urgently, cradling her in his arms. "Stay with me." Her glowing eyes flickered weakly as she looked up at him. "It is done. They will see. They will understand." Jacob's voice broke. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes," she whispered. "I did." As her light faded, the structure around them pulsed one final time, sending a wave of energy out into the galaxy. Jacob held her close, his heart heavy with both grief and hope. The beacon's message was out there now. All they could do was wait, and hope it would be enough. A new alliance. The silence on the ship was deafening as Jacob carried Lyra's unconscious body back aboard. Her light, once vibrant and warm, was now a faint shimmer barely visible against her pale skin. The crew watched in somber silence, their gazes filled with a mix of awe and uncertainty. No one spoke as Jacob marched down the corridor, his steps heavy with the weight of what had just happened. In the medbay, Jacob gently placed Lyra onto a diagnostic bed. The medical officer scanned her, frowning at the readings. "She's stable," the officer said cautiously. "But whatever energy she gave to that beacon, it's left her severely weakened. It's a miracle she's alive." Jacob exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the edge of the bed. He wanted to feel relief, but all he felt was the crushing guilt of watching her sacrifice herself for something he couldn't guarantee would work. The beacon's reach. Hours later, Jacob stood on the bridge, staring at the main screen. A massive wave of energy had rippled out from the ancient sanctuary, spreading across the galaxy. It disrupted communications and activated dormant systems on both human and alien vessels. But more than that, it carried a message, a vivid projection of memories and truths shared by both species. Reports began to flood in. Human colonies were seeing the message, as were alien outposts. The histories of both civilizations played out in raw, unfiltered clarity. The truth was undeniable. Both sides had committed atrocities, both had suffered unimaginable losses, and both had ignored the chance for peace out of fear and pride. "Commander," the communications officer said, her voice breaking the tense quiet, "we're receiving transmissions. From everywhere." "Everywhere?" Jacob asked, turning to her. The officer nodded. "Human command, alien fleets, even independent factions. They're all saying the same thing. They want to talk." Jacob's chest tightened. It was working. Lyra's sacrifice wasn't in vain. "Hatch me through to command," he ordered. "Let's see how ready they are to listen." The call for peace. The holographic image of Admiral Hayes appeared on the main screen, his expression a mix of confusion and irritation. "Reynolds," he snapped, "what the hell have you done? Reports are coming in from across the galaxy about some kind of message." Jacob stood tall, his voice firm. "Admiral, it wasn't just a message. It was the truth. Both sides have seen it now. We can't keep fighting a war based on lies." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "That alien girl, Lyra, she's behind this, isn't she?" "She is," Jacob admitted. "And she's given everything to make sure this message reached both our people. If we don't act now, we'll lose the only chance we have for peace." The Admiral was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed. "The Council is already convening. They've received the message too. And they're considering a ceasefire." Jacob allowed himself a small breath of relief. "Good. I'll represent our side in any negotiations. And Lyra, if she recovers, can speak for hers." "You're stepping into dangerous territory, Commander," Hayes warned. "If this falls apart—" "It won't," Jacob interrupted. "It can't. Not after what we've seen." A fragile meeting. Days later, the human ship and the alien fleet rendezvoused in neutral space. It was the first time since the war began that representatives from both sides sat in the same room. The tension was palpable, but the presence of the beacon's message lingered in everyone's minds, softening the sharp edges of old hatred. Jacob stood at the head of the human delegation, his gaze steady. Beside him, Lyra sat in a chair, her light still faint but her presence commanding. Her glowing eyes scanned the room, meeting those of her people's representatives. An alien elder stood, his voice resonating with authority. "Lyra," he said, bowing slightly, "we thought we had lost you." "You nearly did," Lyra replied softly. "And you nearly lost yourselves. This war has taken too much from both of us. It must end." The elder turned his gaze to Jacob. "And you, human. You protected her, even when your leaders ordered otherwise. Why?" Jacob met the elder's piercing eyes. "Because she isn't just an alien or a trophy. She's a person, and she's the key to something bigger than this war, something worth fighting for." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the delegates. The first step forward. After hours of tense discussions, both sides agreed to an initial ceasefire. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As the meeting ended, Jacob and Lyra stood together, watching as the delegates filed out. "You did it," Jacob said, glancing at her. "You made them listen." "We did it," Lyra corrected, a faint smile gracing her lips. "This is only the beginning. There is still much to rebuild." Jacob nodded, his gaze distant. And there will be people on both sides who won't want this peace. We'll have to be ready for them. We will be, Lyra said, her voice steady, as long as we stand together. A new alliance. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. Both human and alien ships returned to their respective territories, but the lines of communication remained open. Joint teams began dismantling old war machines and rebuilding devastated worlds. Jacob and Lyra worked tirelessly, their partnership becoming a symbol of the fragile alliance. Lyra's light grew stronger each day, and with it, so did Jacob's hope. One evening, as they stood on the observation deck of the ship, watching the stars, Jacob turned to her. "You gave up so much for this. Was it worth it?" Lyra's glowing eyes met his, and for the first time, her smile reached them. "Ask me again when the galaxy is whole." Jacob chuckled softly. "Fair enough." As they stood there, the vast expanse of the galaxy stretched before them, filled with the promise of a future they had fought to create. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, both humanity and the alien civilization had a reason to hope. And that, Jacob thought, was a fight worth winning.